Hi, my name is Esther. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a mental health therapist at Yellow Chair Collective, a psychotherapy practice that specializes in serving the Asian American community. And in the short time that we have together, we will critically explore the history of the myth, its influence, and the stressors that it creates for those of the API diaspora, and how we are all impacted as healers, teachers, loved ones, etc. So, what is Asian American? It's a term that refers to a social and political identity that was coined by activists Yuji Ichioka and Emmett G. in 1968. It rejects the usage of the derogatory term Oriental to describe Asian people. And the coining of the phrase Asian American and the movements that led to its creation was the direct result of radical cross-racial and ethnic solidarity building in the 1960s. It was a label of self-determination that indicated a political agenda of equality, anti-racism, and anti-imperialism. Asian American was an identity that was chosen, not one that was given. Because before this, a pan-ethnic Asian identity didn't exist in the United States. However, the term also serves as a monolithic identity that doesn't recognize the unique heritage and cultures of the 50+ countries that fall under this umbrella. And we'll get into that a little bit more down the line. But for today's purposes, I'll generally be using the term Asian American, although you may hear me use it interchangeably with Asian Pacific Islander or API. So let's consider what comes to mind when you think of the myth of the model minority. What are some stereotypes and assumptions associated? The term model minority was first coined in 1966 by sociologist William Peterson in an article he wrote for the New York Times Magazine entitled Success Story, Japanese American Style. In this article, Peterson emphasized that family structure and cultural emphasis on hard work allowed Japanese Americans to overcome the discrimination against their group and achieve a measure of success in the United States. But what does it really imply? The myth of the model minority is a stereotype that masks the racism and discrimination that Asian Americans face and creates a monolith of over 50 ethnicities, cultures, languages, etc. In lumping us into one identity, it erases the uniqueness and individuality of each of our cultural, religious, and historical identities. And as people and practitioners seeking to do anti-oppressive work, we should always be asking the question, who does it serve? When I think about the myth, I see it as a means to perpetuate anti-Blackness. Its ultimate purpose as an ideology is to further oppress Black and Indigenous people and maintain division amongst people of color from collectively organizing. It's a classic colonizer tactic of divide and conquer. During World War II, the media focused on the perspective that Japanese Americans were not just surviving, but thriving after being held in incarceration camps, which immediately translated to, if Asian people can do it, why can't Black people? As if centuries of Black enslavement can be overcome by hard work and strong family values. It's rooted in the idea that if we believe that Black failure and Asian success cannot be explained by inequities and racism, that they are one and the same. This allows people to avoid any responsibility for addressing racism or the damage it continues to inflict. The myth also distorts the need that API face by upholding the illusion of the lack of need for support, resources, and research for API. Asian Americans have to reconcile their identities and challenges while recognizing the privilege that comes with the model minority myth. It's important to recognize how the myth plays into complex systems that uphold white supremacy. It allows Asian Americans to benefit from systems of power at the expense of the well being of Black, Indigenous, or other people of color, including other Asians, who are not able to achieve societal standards of success based on real structural inequities. So let's take a minute to consider the challenges that we faced when working with multicultural communities. What does deconstructing a racist ideal mean to you? What comes to mind when you think about challenging and deconstructing bias in your work? So, what are the implications of the myth of the model minority? Because the myth assumes that all Asians are smart, hardworking, and naturally succeed, it creates internalized pressure for API to meet such expectations on their own without the help of others. This internalized pressure is not just within individuals, but also within family and community systems. We are made invisible, absent from, and thus silenced, or inadequately represented or distorted in research, data, programming, and policies. This gap in research and access is due to language barriers, fear of retribution due to immigration status, and the myth, just to mention a few. A 2020 study published in The Counseling Psychologist found that a group of Asian American university students had a positive association between imposter feelings and psychological distress, partially mediated by interpersonal shame. Why is this, you ask? Many Asian cultures identify an individual's self-value with interdependence, their ability to care for their family and community, and that community can meet all of an individual's needs. If the individual is not able to meet these expectations, it may lead to a reduction in a sense of self, identity, purpose, translating to trauma through the generations, and perpetuates the idea that people should rely on their family or community for help rather than professional supports. But it's important to remember that at the end of the day, our greatest power is in the collective. To be allies in the liberation of API folks is to be allies in the liberation of all people. To engage in decolonization and create racial equity doesn't mean that you need to have all the knowledge and wisdom about all cultural and marginalized groups. Rather, the key is to stay curious and compassionate. Ask questions and approach with gentleness as you strive to learn and build connections with those you engage with. How are we more similar than we are different? Where can we meet as equals? How can I bolster your humanness? And I know it's a short presentation. There's so much information that we can just continue to digest and sit with. But for practical purposes, I have included a separate handout with ideas for practical implementation of culturally sensitive care. So feel free to take a look and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.